Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Schaberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are happy that you have joined us today. We are here today with Texas Regional Bank, Tanya Castro and Joshua Flores, and they're going to be talking to us about choosing the right trustee. So we're excited to talk about this topic. This is a topic that I know in the families that we serve comes up all the time of how do we select a trustee? How do we know it's the right trustee, a professional trustee, as opposed to a personal family friend or another sibling or something like that? So there's a lot of there's been write-in questions today. We've got all of the write-in questions if you sent one in, and we always appreciate people sending those questions in. I always like to start with a few housekeeping items. We are in webinar mode today, which means that we can't see you or hear you. So in case you were wondering, we can't see you or hear you, but we know you're there and we're glad that you're there. Our chat box is open, and we invite you to put your questions in the chat box. We take questions throughout the presentation and answer as many as we can during the time that we have together. If there are questions that we are unable to answer during the presentation, then certainly you can reach out directly to either us or Texas Regional Bank, and they can take a deeper dive with you on those topics. So for those of you that are joining us for the very first time, welcome. Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors, members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, chartered special needs consultants. Our whole firm is nuanced in helping you plan for the future of your loved one with a disability. People come to us because they want to know how and when to apply for public benefits. How do we maintain eligibility for benefits? And a lot of that, as you guys well know, is through a special needs trust, having money in the right buckets. And when we have a special needs trust, that's where Texas Regional Bank comes in, and having a trustee for that trust, because the individual with a disability absolutely cannot be their own trustee. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but we really help people do holistic planning. It's a big deal when we have a loved one with a disability. Some families have more than one child with a disability. So when we're planning for retirement, we're planning for our own retirement, the spouse retirement, when we have a child with a disability that may have care needs 20 to 30 years after we're gone, that's like another bucket for retirement and careful planning. And how much money do we need to fund a special needs trust? That all goes into play. So we help people put lifetime care plans in place, protection plans. We do a lot of transition planning, a lot of advocacy by way of webinars. We help people set up ABLE accounts, and we help you on your planning journey. So when it comes to your planning journey, I would suggest that you need a team. You need a team of professionals in your planning journey. It's not just, a special needs planner. It's not just an estate planning attorney. It's not just a bank to help the trustee. It's like you need the right people on the bus in the right seats, directing how things go. And so one of the things that we believe wholeheartedly, whether you work with us or you work with Texas Regional Bank or you work with somebody else, what my strong suggestion is that this is not a do-it-yourself project, and that you do work with a professional that is specifically nuanced with people with disabilities and public benefits, because those little mistakes that other professionals, it's not that they're unprofessional, they just might not be trained specifically for public benefits or things like that, that can make a big difference to your loved one. Their benefits, sometimes these benefits, they've been waiting for 17 to 20 years, like a Medicaid waiver. So that's why it's such a big deal. So today we are so happy to be here with Tanya and Josh. And so with Texas Regional Bank. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you dig into this topic. I'm eager to hear this. One thing that I hear all the time is it's after me, there is nobody else. So then what do I do when it comes to a professional trustee? And that question is twofold. Who's going to be the future guardian? Okay, that's a whole nother ball game. And who is going to be the trustee of the special needs trust that's going to fund the future care for our loved one. And I have been a trustee before for a large trust, and what I would say, it's not a small job, and it's not a job for the faint of heart. And it is a job for somebody that has a strong financial background, strong financial wherewithal. And so I always am a believer of choosing wisely when we select our trustee, and that those choices may change through the years, and it's okay. But I think because it is important, and some of these trusts might be funded with millions of dollars, it is important that we've got the right person for the job, or the right team for the job on that. So having said that, welcome. I'm so glad to be here with you, and we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Allison, and I'm so grateful about that teamwork. Yes, we can't do it all. It's heavy lifting for sure, right? So, well, my name is Tanya T. Castro. I'm a wealth strategist with Texas Regional Bank. I love my job, and you might be, asking, what is a wealth strategist? It's a fancy title, but it's someone that will help in getting you to the right places with short-term, long-term goals in mind. Talking trust, talking about estates, and just money management in general. So I'm glad to be here. I am a certified financial planner, a certified trust fiduciary advisor, which means I went to trust school. And most recently, I received my accredited estate planner designation. So I think I'm finished with getting those, symbols and letters behind my name, but you still have your continuing ed. And I just really appreciate the work that I do and what we can bring forward for families and give that peace of mind. I also asked one of my colleagues to join us. So Josh, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Joshua Flores. I'm the Chief Fiduciary Officer at Texas Regional Bank. Really what that means is I oversee the entirety of the trust department, which means everything from IRAs to estate accounts to traditional trusts, including special needs trusts. So I oversee that for the entirety of the bank. Before I joined Texas Regional Bank, I was a trial lawyer where I served for 10 years trying trust and estate cases. That was my specialty. So uniquely positioned to understand the complexities of all different kinds of trusts, having tried them to juries and really dealt with things, quite frankly, I think most of the things that I've done in my career, people would probably have never heard about. And I'm proud of that, because that means they didn't go to court, because we were able to identify the issues and get a resolution before the problem became an actual problem. And I bring that experience here to Texas Regional Bank with me as well. And that's one of the things I love about this job, is getting to look at things on the front end and work with people like Tanya, work with people like Allison, work with our clients and the families, understand the issues that they have. And everybody has issues, whether it's, interpersonal family issues, whether it's financial, whether it's a combination thereof. There's always something that needs to be addressed when you're putting together the right plan for your family, and every family is different. And it's a lot of fun to be able to take the experience that I have, understanding what happens when things go wrong and what that looks like, and applying that on in a future looking scenario where we can say, okay, I understand these are the things that you're concerned about. Here's where this could go wrong. Here's where we can try to make it right on the front end to avoid those long-term problems. So that's kind of my outlook. And then our group as a whole. So our bank is headquartered in Harlingen, Texas, but we are a Texas-based bank. Our group for the trust department is headquartered here in Houston. So while the decisions for the overall bank are made down in the Rio Grande Valley, the decisions for the trust department are made here in Houston, which I think is a really big thing. Because when you get to some of the larger banks, they may be making decisions that are outside the state. We'll talk about that further in the presentation. But our group as a whole sits here in Houston from a management perspective. Tanya also sits here in Houston. We have a few trust officers as well in the Rio Grande Valley. We're a relatively small bank when it comes to trust and wealth management, and that's by design. We want everybody to have as most of a custom experience as we can possibly make. We have a lot of really big bank experience on our team. with our president coming from Northern Trust and being a board certified estate planning lawyer, chief investment officer also coming from Northern Trust. Tanya joined us from Cadence Bank. And then we have some other folks as well who have come from other large institutions. So we have a lot of experience in our group, but in a very small, what I would say, customized package, which is kind of the entire point. That's why we're all here. So we can do things the right way and the way we want to.
And we're very much Texas focused. So I'm glad that we're here and be able to talk about choosing the right trustee. I get this all the time with business development and talking with families and what's important and what is the professional trustee? What is the corporate trustee? Can you work with a co-trustee, a family member? And so I think this was great timing. And Allison, I thank you for your platform to educate your clients and prospective clients. And also shout out to Meredith for coordinating all of this. And this is a weekly program, I believe. And you always have new topics that are just central to families with disabilities. So again, I appreciate the time that you have. And I'm going to go ahead and get Josh to talk about what is a trustee as an attorney. He will be able to kind of talk about that definition. And I think just our time today will be more conversational. Allison has also opened up for Q&A today. So please, we want this to be interactive. We want this to hit home for you guys and to be able to leave within this hour to have some of your answers. Okay. All right, Josh, what is a trustee?
Yeah, so I'm sure you all can read. A trustee is a person or organization that gives responsibility for managing someone else's property or money through a trust. That's the legal definition. That's what that means in my eyes. But I'm going to flip it back to Tanya because Tanya brings the other side of things. It's not the legal side. Sometimes I can get blindfolded in. I fully admit that. But Tanya, what does that mean to you? You're not a lawyer. So when you read that definition or when you think about what a trustee does, having served as a trust officer in prior roles, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's an important, trusted person that is going to be there for the long haul, that's going to understand the intentions of that trust agreement, be able to communicate with the beneficiaries that live in this trust. You talk about attorneys. Yes, we need attorneys to draft for that trust. And I know I was at a different function and the presenter was talking about a trust like a home. Right? You have someone constructing that home, but you need people to live in there. And so the trustee is going to live in that trust. The beneficiary is going to live in that trust. So it's an important mechanism, an important home that a lot of decisions are made, and we'll build on that trust, right, over time. So yeah, my definition's a little different, but I think we both get to the end result.
So one person asked, is it better for us to select a trustee or a professional trustee that is close to where the individual lives?
So we're going to get to that one. We've got a point on that here in just a bit. Before we move on from this, I'll give what I think is the non-legal definition of this. And from my perspective is when you're picking a trustee, the trustee is the person who you are trusting to administer and manage the affairs of that trust, period. Whether that is, they're your quarterback. They're the person that you're going to come to or the beneficiary is going to come to when they need something. And in the case of a special needs trust, it may be medical benefits, it may be other types of benefits, and you need that quarterback to know the entire playbook. And the reason that that's important is because depending on the scenario that you're in, there may be a play that you can run or a play that you can't that's going to get you into trouble. And that goes back to what Allison was talking about at the very beginning, to make sure that you have someone who understands the financial issues, but also the tax issues, and also the other governmental benefits issues that may be affecting somebody that is a beneficiary of a special needs trust. So you want to make sure that the person that you're entrusting, this money, this property, the livelihood of that particular beneficiary in the future, you want to make sure that they know exactly what it is, not only that you want, but exactly what is hopefully the best case scenario for the beneficiary, and that they can administer that trust accordingly going forward, even when you're not here. Because that's the biggest thing. You are picking somebody or an institution to be able to make decisions oftentimes when you're not here. And that's why it's really important that you pick the right person.
Now, some trusts we've seen have language in them such as trust protector, because there have been what we refer to as bad actors, that maybe someone you thought would be a good trustee turns out they weren't, or there were issues, as you guys well know. And so, which makes it a thing to be able to have a new trustee, maybe from the grave, right? That there are some protections that a family can have in place, because I think sometimes families feel like, well, I mean, this is good now, but it might not always be good, or my trustee could die or could become incapacitated, or maybe has their own personal things going on and this is too big of a job for them to handle. Things could change. So I do want you guys to address that. I'm sure your slides probably will. But things can change and be fluid through the years. And if we're already gone, we want to make sure that things are going to be there for our loved one.
Absolutely. So we do have a little bit on trust protectors later. But as a general rule, so a trust protector is a provision that can be put in a particular trust document. And it, their name is kind of indicative of what they do, but not always. Their powers can vary greatly depending on what it is that the grantor, meaning the creator of the trust, wants them to have. Sometimes they're very finite in that their powers may be, they can only remove and replace a trustee. So sometimes that's a very specific power that they have. They can remove a trustee for cause or not, and replace a trustee if there's a reason to do so. Sometimes their powers are a lot more broad. And I've seen documents where someone who's named as a trust protector can have everything from removal powers to investment powers to all kinds of different things. So it's really important that if you want to have some semblance of those types of controls, that you discuss that with your estate planner and make sure that you're really vetting out all of the issues, because there's ways that you can deal with some of those things without having a trust protector. And then, it adds a layer of safety, but it also adds a layer of complexity, because just like you're having to pick the right trustee, you also have to pick the right trust protector. And trust protectors are usually individuals, which means now you're going to have a laundry list of people, because unlike a bank or some sort of corporate institution, people die. And so then you have to account for the fact that those people, they may either decide they don't want to do it because they don't have to. They may get sick. They may have circumstances that prevent them from doing it, or they may die. And so you have to account for all of those things. And so it just adds a layer of complexity, but it is a way for you to have some additional controls if that's something that you're concerned about.
So this slide lends itself to one of the questions. So we're going to be talking about duties and responsibilities. And one of the questions was, how complicated is it for an individual to manage a special needs trust? Do they need to know a lot about tax laws as well as accounting? And one thing that I have seen is where these good trust documents allow a provision in the trust to hire a CPA, to hire an attorney, to hire the professionals that you might need. And I think that is good. I don't know what you guys think, but I think financial wherewithal background is good. I mean, they don't have to have a PhD in finance, but I would argue it's not necessarily a small job. It's not running a bank account like you normally do. So I guess this slide's probably going to kind of dig into some of the responsibilities that they might have with that.
I mean, it can be done,
Yeah.
and we work with individual trustees all the time, and it goes back to that team, right? You're able to go and hire that attorney that works in the space, that CPA that understands special needs trust, your advisor on the investment side. So as long as you have that team that you're comfortable with and is hitting those goals that you're looking for and that advice, you should be fine. But again, you do have a shelf life, right? Maybe retirement comes in, maybe you can finally go and have a Europe vacation because you have a great place that your son or daughter now resides, which is outside of your home, and you can enjoy that. And so maybe you might want to partner with a corporate trustee so that you can go and do those holidays. So I guess getting back to it, you can, but be smart, be proactive with that team, communicate your issues, and they'll also advise you correctly. But know there is a corporate trustee for a backup, right? Things do happen. An early
And I would,
passing, disability. So just think about that. They're there to assist.
yeah, and I would add to that in the sense that, so I don't think it's an easy job. Certainly, I've worked with individual trustees in my legal practice and here at TRB that have done a phenomenal job. And typical traits of those types of people are they're usually former or reformed CPAs that are very, very good at record keeping. That's a trend that I've noticed. Or they have some sort of financial background. But being a very good steward of records, being able to understand the tax and financial consequences of any actions are really important. But that kind of the team approach is really something that I think is important to highlight here, because even at our bank and others, I mean, you're not getting just one person who's doing everything on your account. You have an entire team, is the way that we build it out around our particular clients. You have a trust officer who's your kind of day-to-day point of contact, but who also is going to do the administrative things and understand some of the tax issues and understand these trustee duties and responsibilities that are on the slide here. They understand these fundamental issues in doing everything that they're doing from an administrative standpoint. But then we also have an investment person who's on that team. We have in-house folks who understand and have complexities surrounding their tax understandings. We have lawyers on staff, including myself. So you put all of those things together, and all of that is what comes together to administer this account as a whole from a team perspective. Like I said, there are individuals that can do that, and I've seen them do that, but usually they're they create a team around themselves. They may do the finances or the books, but then they have a really high-powered or quality CPA. They may have an investment manager, which makes sense because unless, I think it would be a fundamental breach of some of the duties that are on this slide if you're acting as trustee and you just decide, I'm just going to invest, with a little bit of knowledge that I have on a Schwab account. You might get lucky, you might not. And you don't have anything to hang your hat on as far as having an investment professional to say, listen, I hired a professional that's supposed to know how to do these things. And you want that because look, not everything goes right all the time. Nobody's perfect. Nobody, including myself. That's just how it is. Nobody's perfect. But you want to hire the best team that you can to make sure that you give yourself the closest chance to get to perfection as you can. And that includes a competent CPA, competent lawyers, and a competent trustee. And like I said, that doesn't mean it can't be an individual, but I do think it makes it difficult for an individual to do those things. So I'll run through these duties real quick. The duty of loyalty. So when I used to take depositions, I love this question. This is my favorite question. The trustee has to place at all times the interest of the beneficiary above his own. I love asking trustees or former trustees the question. So how did that decision benefit your beneficiary versus how did it benefit you? And that's how you have to think about it. You have to be able to make decisions independent of how it benefits you and say, look, this may hurt. I might lose a toe during this process, but it's going to make my beneficiary better. or it's going to do something for them. You
No
have to be able to
self-dealing.
make that decision. No self-dealing.
Yes.
There are nuances to that, but as a general rule, no self-dealing. And then a duty of competence. And this is where I think it becomes really difficult for, I would say, a new person who doesn't understand this world, which we live in a very technical and complex world as trustees. If you don't understand this world, you may not know about these duties. The duty to comply with the prudent investor rule. Now, I know what the prudent investor rule is, and I'm sure someone can go look that up. But if you don't even know to go look that up, then you may run afoul of something completely unintentionally. And by the way, the prudent investor rule means that you have to invest assets as a prudent person would, which basically means don't invest the trust assets in a way that you wouldn't probably invest your own assets. That's a general way of looking at it. So if you're a very conservative investor and you have all of your assets in fixed income and you say, but I've got this trust account and I've always wanted to invest in Bitcoin, and you go invest all the trust assets in Bitcoin, you've made a mistake. So that's kind of a general thing to think about. You have to treat it almost as if it were exactly your own. The duty not to delegate, there are very nuanced exceptions to that, but as a general rule, if you're a trustee, it's your job, it's your responsibility. You don't get to push those powers and those responsibilities onto somebody else. Keep and render accounts. Record keeping is really, really important. It's important that you keep good records, because 10 years from now, when someone asks a question, you're not going to remember what you did or why you did it. You have to keep the records to understand and tell the story. And that's where
was that an income distribution? Was that a principal distribution? Because you have different beneficiaries. You have your current beneficiary, who's our special needs beneficiary, and you've got a future beneficiary. Maybe that's another family member. Maybe that's a charity. So you always have this kind of, okay, how do I pay these dollars, right? So that's another complexity to add.
That's right. That's right. And then to exercise reasonable care and skill. So what does that mean? Well, the word reasonable, I tried an entire case over what the word reasonable means. So look, basically, in a nutshell, what that means is if you have a particular set of skills, you need to use them. So if you're a CPA and you're really good with numbers, you need to utilize that to the benefit of this trust. If you're a lawyer and you have those skills, you need to utilize that to the benefit of the trust. You need to act reasonably. You can't bury your head in the sand, and you can't go out and do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. So those are just some of the fundamental duties. I know there's more on that list, but I think they're relatively self-explanatory. I will hit on the duty not to commingle funds. Keep a separate account for your trust accounts. So if you have a trust account and you have a personal account, you cannot combine those accounts together, because then it becomes a tracing problem. It becomes an issue on, okay, what money went where? Whose money is this? What return went where? Don't do that. Keep them segregated. Really, really important. And then a duty of full disclosure. So a lot of people, and I've had people quote this to me in my legal career, well, duty of full disclosure means you have to tell me everything. I want to know everything. That's not right. That's not what that means. It means you have a duty to disclose all material facts. So look, if there's a fact or circumstance or issue that is going to affect the beneficiaries or the administration of the trust, certainly you need to disclose that. Do you need to disclose that you had a meeting or you went to the bank to go, make a deposit on such and such day? No. The ministerial things you don't need to do. But you want to make sure you have good statements, you have good records, and you want to make sure you're keeping people reasonably informed. If you do that, and I will say the highest number of cases that I saw in the course of my legal career were generally related to a trustee failing to have proper and effective communications with their beneficiary. Communications are incredibly important. You've got to let them know what's going on, because if they don't know what's going on, a lot of people assume you're doing something wrong or you're hiding something, and that can lead to litigation. So you want to make sure that disclosure is happening.
Yeah,
I see a couple of questions in here. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Tanya.
I think about selling property, right? There's so many moving parts to moving property and bids and what do we need to do. So I always think of that full disclosure as well.
Absolutely. When you have a transaction that's going on, and trustees, that's our job. We get paid to make the difficult decisions. And that may mean that, look, we may be telling you, hey, we're selling this piece of property and we got an offer for 500,000 from one person, but it was going to be financed. And we got an offer for $475,000 and it's all cash. And we decided for whatever reason that we're taking the 475 because they can close tomorrow and we need the money. Rather than the $500,000 that we're going to get paid out over time. And some people may say, yeah, but you're taking less money. But as long as we've disclosed that to you and we're being reasonable in what we've done, that may be the right decision. It may not. Everything is factually dependent. But making sure that communication is had. Because what happens in litigation world is you have an offer for 475 and you have an offer for 500. You accept the 475. You don't tell them why. And then they find out 6 months later that you had an offer for 500,000. They don't know the circumstances surrounding it. Mm-hmm. And they say, you shorted us $25,000. You're a bad trustee. What are you doing? And now you've got to turn back around and explain those things. If you explained it on the front end, then you get that out there and you let them know what your reasoning is, what your methodology is. Doesn't mean everybody's always going to agree with it, but at least you're disclosing and you're being honest and transparent. And transparency is important.
So we have a few questions. If you are a small group, how does that affect your cost or fees? What is important is that the trustee is knowledgeable in supporting the ongoing life and lifestyle of our disabled family members. I'm not sure I fully understand the small group part. Maybe you guys.
No, happy to answer it. So we're a smaller group compared to some of the large national banks. We currently manage about $3.9 billion. I think that's the number today, although after yesterday in the market, maybe it's 3.8. But in any event, so our group, we're under 5 billion. So I say small in that regard. But as far as fees go, actually one of the first things I did when I started here was I gathered every fee schedule that I possibly could from all of our competing institutions. I didn't get all of them, but I got as many as I could at the time. And I redid our fee schedule, and you'd actually find, I believe, that we have the most competitive fee schedule in the market. So that's, I think we have some of the lower costs that you'll find.
So that's I think fees matter. I mean, fees matter. And then I've heard people say, well, could I get a professional trustee and then they're going to lock the fees in? And I haven't seen anybody that's going to lock the fees in because they might be managing this trust for 40 years. It could be a really long time. So I've not seen that. I mean, obviously, times change, but I think paying attention to that is good. And so for the sake of time, because we do have a lot of questions and more slides, I'll just run through a couple and then we'll go on to the next slide.
Yeah, Allison, I had something else to just add. It's the value add for that company that you're looking at, right? You want to look at the fees. You also want to look at their historical performance investment numbers, right? That's also a piece of the puzzle. You don't just want to go to a low cost provider that might not be there to address those local needs. So please ask those questions for the fee schedule. And yes, we normally would not say that this is going to be a 10-year fee schedule. We wouldn't be able to promise that.
Sure.
Software changes to have Josh on our team. Of course, that talent is expensive. So you have to be able to know how business goes. So just please do that review on both the fees and the historical, and then that value add that they're going to bring to the table for you.
And really what I've seen historically on the banks that have the special needs division and professional trustees for special needs, they have been smaller, more regional banks, and they have more of a hometown feel in working with families as opposed to some of the big giant names in banks where you're an 800 number and you're just one of many. And so I think that is vastly different. So one person says, if my special needs trustee is managing my money left to the beneficiary more or less once she's gone, if someone else left my beneficiary money and does not want to be a part of the special needs trust, how do you deal with this? And that's where when we do a presentation about special needs trust, first party and third party special needs trust, they don't have to be a part of your third party special needs trust, but they should be knowledgeable to know that they shouldn't leave money outright to the individual, that it should be left to them in a third party special needs trust. There could be as many special needs trusts as you want. You could have one, grandma and grandpa could have one, the ex-spouse could have one because they don't want to commingle, and that's okay. But if the person is just not cooperative at all, and they want to name your loved one specifically as a beneficiary, then we can create the OOPS trust, the first party special needs trust. It's expensive to do it that way, and it would be needed to go into a first party special needs trust to preserve eligibility for those various programs. So there is a fix. So if we have somebody that digs their heels in, they don't want to participate in the special needs trust, they're not willing to set up a third party special needs trust of their own, and they're just going to leave the money to the person outright despite what you've told them, there is a fix for it after the fact. It's just usually more expensive and time consuming. You guys want to talk about that?
Fix
Sure.
eventually with maybe modifying things or going in and creating and applying to the probate court. You can do that. And if that is the case where there's numerous special needs trusts, in existence, you're going to want to have the same trustee on all of them so you can coordinate correctly, right? We might want to spin down this account because there isn't any generation skipping tax on it. It's exempt, or it's just small enough. Let's just go ahead and get some exempt, buy some exempt resources, a car, a prepaid funeral. So you want to be smart with it. You don't want to have several trustees managing these separate trusts, because then you're going to be disqualified because nobody knows what the other one's doing or know what their goals are. So yeah, there's fixes, and thankfully we know that team to go about getting those done and the timeframes to do that.
And furthermore, I just wanted to say too, in the example of the person in our chat box that asked that question, if the person that wants to leave money to your kid and won't leave it to the special needs trust, if that money is less than the annual amount that you can contribute to an ABLE account each year, then that money could be quickly moved over to an ABLE account. And for 2026, it's $20,000 for 2026. So, and we have entire presentations on special needs trust for third party and first party, as well as ABLE accounts. So one person had a comment: the power to remove and replace trustees helps keep fees in line. In measuring investment performance, you need to evaluate the risk of the investments as well to be able to compare apples to apples, which is also true. So thank you guys for that. All right, so we're going to talk about the good qualities. We've kind of touched on some of those already of a good trustee.
Yeah, we can kind of review this slide, and we've talked about the first bulletin point, the second one, strong professional communication skills. That's someone that needs to call back when your client is, or your beneficiary is asking, for some distribution, right? I've heard that, other individual trustees might not call. All right. They've had enough and they're just not going to call. The weekend's coming, and a professional trustee is not going to do that. We have guidelines to talk back to our clients, give them some guidance on what to do. Yes, we're going to ask questions as to why do you need this distribution? Does it make sense? Is that something that we budgeted already within our spending plan for 2026? And I just think that's important, being honest, being there for your client clients through all life events. There's all things that go. We talk about bereavement, we talk about marriage, we talk about all kinds of things, and separate property discussions. If that is going to be occurring about a marriage, then we talk about those things. So I think you just need to have a trustee that you that's reliable, that can be there, that will understand your needs. I know when Josh and I were kind of planning this discussion today, we had talked about Hurricane Harvey, right? All of us will know exactly what that is here in the Houston area, and also the recent floods that were in the Hill Country. That's very emotional. And if you have a corporate trustee or maybe a trustee that's outside the state, they might not know how jarring it was to us individually and our families, and they might not know how important it is to go have a generator, connected to your house so that this won't happen, because we have a medically, person that needs air or whatever is the case. So I think those things are important. So you need to be able to have a trusted trustee to go through those life events with each other. Another bulletin point on there was that the ability to handle complex assets, right? We're in Texas, there's oil and gas, mineral rights, there's ranches. Can they handle those? And those are questions that you'll probably want to ask that trustee. And timely payments, that might seem not as obvious, but to be able to have your reoccurring distribution hit your checking account or your TrueLink card or your Able account, to coordinate all that. Even if I'm out of the office, I was in Bell last week, but we have everything automated on our systems. An individual trustee might not have that automation or the knowledge to work with the Able accounts. So those are important. There's assisted living bills that need to be done. You have delinquent taxes that might come that have a price tag for being delinquent. And you have a very well trust that can pay for those things. So again, I know I'm being nitpicky, but nitpicky is important. I don't like fees. I'm the one that likes to have everything on sale. So I think that's all we wanted to do was to cover on that. Is there anything else, Josh, that you thought we might need to cover on that screen?
Just to say, look, not every trust comes to us in what I would say is a nice, clean, neat, and tidy package. And that happens from time to time. And so making sure that you have a trustee that will either prevent that from happening or can solve those problems when they do occur. I think the biggest example I have is I have a couple of trusts that we've taken over where there were some assets that were supposed to get funded into that trust, particularly oil and gas assets or other real estate properties, and they were never titled correctly going back 2 generations. And so we identified that as an issue and said, hey, this was supposed to come to our trust, and we need to go get them. And so we've had to open up legal proceedings in different states throughout the country to make sure that those assets flow down into the trust and actually are there for our beneficiaries. And that's something that without the proper background or education on those particular things, I think it would be really difficult for an individual trustee to do.
We have trustee options here. Sole trustee, individual, family, friends, corporate trustee, that they have sole discretion to handle that trust. And then you can also do co-trustee. Most people might think that's just 2 people, but it honestly could be 3, 4, but then it's not optimal. You got to kind of figure out what that works. And that can be a combination of family members and a professional, or all family members. So just something to consider. We wanted to make sure that you were knowledgeable about that.
On the co-trustee, I just wanted to comment on that. I kind of think of the co-trustees as kind of like the more roommates, not necessarily the better. If we've got the more people on the line that have an opinion about this, the slower things get handled, and then the higher the possibility of division occurs, is what I have seen. I've actually seen some pretty big train wrecks with the co-trustees where there's like 4 or 5, it's like different siblings or cousins that are scattered all across the earth, and some of them don't like each other, and it starts getting, people do people things, and it starts getting tricky. And I've seen it work. I'm sure you guys have seen it work too, but I do think of, when I think of my kids in college and roommates and stuff like that, and our most favorable situations have been no roommates. It's like, you start having all those roommates and all those opinions. It's kind of,
It does get tricky, I will tell you that. And I think just being upfront and seeing what they're asking for, sometimes they just have unreasonable requests. And then also the fees, if they're going to serve, they're going to want to get paid. So you're going to want to talk about that in your documentation too. What is reasonable for an individual trustee that might not have the knowledge for trusteeship, right? Delegation, how does that look? And also the custody of assets. That should primarily be the bank, and we usually have that written in because co-trustees can be bad actors. And if they have a checking account that they can maybe go take to Vegas and hopefully no one sees it, we need to safeguard. So we talk about those things. So there is a lot more discussion about that, and that could be its own presentation.
and there's some other stuff in the chat box about that as well. And I think the only other thing I would say is that if there's a bunch of people and they all that clear communication that we were talking about, we have to talk to all of them. That can just delay a distribution that might be needed more timely than what is possible as a result of that. So, not against it, but just being aware of that is certainly a thing. So,
Yeah, and my piece on co-trustees. So I tried a case that went all the way to the Texas Supreme Court and back on co-trustees. They can be incredibly difficult. And really, I mean, the arrangement has to be about just right to make it work, even in the best of circumstances, because the trust code specifically says that trustees have to act by majority. Now, the trust document itself can override that provision, but a lot of times you end up with a trust document that they don't address how the co-trustees are going to interact with one another. They simply name co-trustees, and that's where you run into a big problem, particularly when you have an even number of co-trustees. So if there's a co-trustee relationship, you really want to talk to your estate planning lawyer and make sure that they button up those provisions that says they either shall act by unanimous vote or by majority, or if there's a deadlock, there's a way to break that tie, because otherwise you are headed for, there will be a decision at some point in time where people just don't agree. And now you're in a situation where nobody can make any action without going to court. And that becomes expensive. And those fees will be paid by the trust for both sides. And so it becomes expensive and it becomes incredibly slow. So if you're going to have a co-trustee provision, and I see a question in here about, well, what if you had a sibling or a family member who's a co-trustee that can help give you that kind of family history, family knowledge, and I understand that desire, but you have to have a way to break the tie or to prevent a deadlock, because if you don't, you're destined for a deadlock or a disaster at some point.
Right. Well, I know we're getting close to time, and I would like to go to the potential interview questions because I think those are very important. That's the powerhouse of this discussion. I want to make sure people feel empowered when they go in to talk to their potential trustee. And I kind of got this idea from one of our local estate planning attorneys, Joy Eckelkamp with Bentley Eckelkamp. And I just see a huge difference when I come in to talk about TRB and what we can do for the family. And if they have this list in hand, and of course they can come and customize to what's going to be important to them, but I would like to talk about this, and there's 2 pages on it. So let's just go ahead and drill down. Where's the trust going to be administered? Is this a call center versus a signed trust team? And Allison, you talked about it. There are 1-800 trust officers out there. And this, special needs side, there's too many things there that need to have a strong relationship. This is sensitive material, and no one needs to replay their disability, their their situation over and over to someone who they'll never have a relationship on at 800. So ask that question. What is the investment philosophy of the bank? How do they go about making those decisions? Is the beneficiary consulted, or are they asked about what keeps them up at night? Is there a legacy asset that has automatically been inherited to this trust? Maybe is a concentration that's 20% of the value or more. So we're going to need to discuss that. Is it automatically going to be liquidated because of the policies of the bank? So, those are so important questions, and I can kind of drill down more on there, but I want to make sure we get to the full questions here.
Tanya,
And
I
then,
want to say that I think it's important. I would say that all banks are not created equally, as you well know.
yes.
And I think it's important to ask what the bank's guidelines and provisions are, because I've seen some that are pretty restrictive before. Like it says that we won't make a distribution for housing or whatever, because they're trying to maintain public benefits, but that's not a blanket all the time. It's true that it would reduce SSI, but if the people are gone, if the parents are deceased, the kid's getting survivor benefits in most cases, right? Like, so things change. So to me, where I've seen some, it's like where these provisions where we like blanketly made a provision that they didn't completely understand, and then it wasn't exactly what the family had in mind long term. I think the whole point was we want to preserve public benefits and Medicaid waivers, but then a blanket statement like that without flexibility might not be what a family has in mind, I guess is what I'm saying.
It's
Yeah,
true.
I would agree with that. We don't have any policies like that. It's really every trust relationship is kind of a case by case basis. We have general guidelines and rules, kind of for internal things, but we're not going to make and just say, look, we never make distributions for housing, or we never make distributions for these kind of things. It's all going to be based on an individual evaluation, which I think is important because no trust is the same. I
And
mean, we have
I
trust
was just going to
for
say that it
siblings.
also largely depends on the words that are inside the trust and what the
Right.
provisions that you had put in the trust when you created the trust with your attorney. So if you wanted provisions in the trust, like we had one that we saw that said, there's this monthly distribution that they're going to get, but then they could have an additional distribution if they start a business or business related expenses. There could be an additional distribution for college. There could be an additional distribution if you graduate college, or a down payment on the house. There's all kinds of provisions. We could have a whole webinar on provisions that people could have in their trust. But
Hmm.
part of a trustee's job is following what the trust says. Like, so where somebody's trust may have specifically forbid some kind of expense, that's just the wording of the document, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And I
That's
would
exactly
say
right.
too, communities change, right? The housing that they grew up in. I used to live out in Mission Bend, and that was like the best place in Fort Bend County growing up. And I know things have changed. Being safe is a really important thing for our beneficiaries and for the grantors aspect. And so maybe they can't reside at that house because it's just not safe. They're getting broken into, the car, all those things. And so if I need to move them, then we're going to move them for security
Right.
reasons. And I might have to expend more, right, for a better apartment or assisted living. And then we'll just have to do that.
So
Whatever makes sense.
there's a great question in the chat box, and I do want you to address that. Putting the money aside for the moment, who's going to meet with the beneficiary to know his or her everyday needs and know how to accommodate them? And that's something that you guys do. You guys get in the weeds with that. Like, the people that you are serving. It's not an 800 number or an empty suit. So do talk about that, because I think that that's important to understand.
Yeah, that's right. So it actually answers this question: may I meet with the potential trust team in advance of selecting you as my trustee? And that's exactly what we would encourage you to do, and exactly what I think you should ask in these scenarios. Look, okay, you may be Texas Regional Bank, or you may be whatever other bank, but who do I get to talk to on a daily basis? Who are we dealing with? And in general, it's going to be your trust officer. Your trust officer is going to be your assigned, or the beneficiary's assigned, primary contact. Now, in the case of a special needs trust, depending on the beneficiary may not be able to talk or communicate or whatever the case may be. So that trust officer is going to deal with the correct family member, or sometimes non-family member who's the guardian of the person, or maybe the power of attorney, or maybe the person who's in charge. And while the parents are still alive, y'all are the natural guardians under the law. And so dealing with it in that way. But it's the trust officer who is your daily point of contact. And then you have an investment officer who you will have contact with as well. And the way that we work is you have multiple points of contact. And while we do have a 800 number that you call as like our main line, that's our actual phone number. You're not getting a robocall. There's no AI person that's answering. In fact, if you look up at the website and you dial my phone number, I'm going to answer my own phone. I don't even have anybody that answers the phone for me. It's just how we work. And the same's true with Tanya. Her number's on the website. If you call her, you will get her phone number. And she will answer the phone unless she's in Vail like she was last week. But in any event, my point being, you want to make sure that you have a real live human being that you're talking to, and you're not getting put through to a call center to make sure that you have a real person that you're dealing with, and to make sure you understand the team. The next question I saw, looks like Mary posted it. Does the beneficiary get to decide where they want to live? Maybe. And that all depends on who that beneficiary is. They're a part of a special needs trust for a reason. And a lot of it is going to depend on the amount of capacity that they have or don't have. And that's all going to be individually based on the medical issues that exist with that particular beneficiary. I'm very, very fortunate and knowledgeable on those issues because of my prior job. I reviewed a lot of medical records and dealt with a lot of incapacities and dementias and those types of things. I realize this is not always related to dementia or something like that, but nonetheless, very, very familiar with reviewing those types of medical records and understanding the elements of capacity and incapacity, and whether someone can perform their activities of daily living or manage, a small bank account or a large bank account, what that looks like. And all of that is going to be really individual dependent.
And then obviously, and we've done webinars on this, guardianship, partial guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, are they under a power of attorney, supported decision-making agreement, which all goes back to exactly what you said, which was capacity or lack thereof. And so it is very, very, very individualized on that. So we've talked about a lot of things. We always talk about the things that we want to keep on the special needs planning radar. We do webinars every week on these topics. All of our past webinars live on the YouTube channel. Everybody that has signed up for today's webinar is going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording so you can play back or kind of see some of the notes. This is just going to be a link for any of the upcoming webinars that we have, and you can browse by topic and sign up for the ones that you are interested in. We work on a collaborative team here at CPG. And we always stand ready to help you plan for the future of your loved one. We offer free personalized consultations. This QR code takes you to our calendar where you can schedule a consultation with us. But I want to hear from you guys. So people are here today because they wanted to learn about professional trustees and Texas Regional Bank, and if that should be in the running for their consideration for professional trustees. As far as meeting with you or having a consultation, do you guys do like virtual consultations, in-person consultations, phone consultations? How do they learn more and talk to you about their specific situation?
I would say all the above.
Sure, we do.
Whatever makes sense for them.
All of the above.
Yes. And I would say in closing, communicate this plan. Communicate that you have hired such and such bank. Communicate to the co-trustee, the trust protector, to the beneficiary. It's always best when mom and dad say, hey, I picked and worked hard on selecting these groups. And so please communicate. And if you need help on that communication style or when and where, talk to those trusted advisors.
For sure. I know that we give advice on verbiage on that because sometimes people don't like having these conversations. Sometimes the people in their lives are older and maybe keep their cards close to the chest and don't want to talk about stuff like that. Sometimes it just feels uncomfortable, but I do think that it is very, very important to have those conversations. And then in closing, what I would say is it's also important to not just one and done this and check it off the list and put it on the shelf for the next 25 years. I encourage the families that we work with to evaluate things, look at your legal documents every 3 to 5 years. It doesn't mean that you have to change everything, but when you look at them every 3 to 5 years, what you thought 3 or 5 years ago might be vastly different than what you think now. Your kids that you thought were grossly immature 5 years ago may have arrived, right? Some of the people that you have in your documents may now be incapacitated or have passed on. So it is really, really important to check those things out and look at it periodically from time to time. Well, it has certainly been my pleasure being here with you guys today. You guys gave a lot of great information. Guys, reach out to Texas Regional Bank, Tanya and Josh, and let them share with you a little bit more how they might be able to help your family. So if you guys have any additional questions that didn't get answered today, again, please feel free to reach out to them or us, and we're happy to help any way that we can. Certainly been my pleasure, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.